Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. We always start Tuesday with announcements and exciting stuff coming up. First of all, tonight is the part 2 of the two-part series on the myth of mental illness by Tom Szasz, a psychiatrist who spoke out against psychiatry. I always say I pick books that I think people should read to use for my advanced study courses, and I know that they won't read them. And I probably wouldn't be reading this book if I weren't preparing these workshops for you guys, because it is a hard book to read, but it is filled with great information, not only about the mental health issue, but about the problem with reimbursement. You know, this book was written decades ago, and I'm amazed at how Dr. Szasz predicted a lot of what's going on right now in terms of problems with healthcare and who pays for it and all that sort of thing. So anyway, part 2 is tonight. You can listen to part 1 on the recording if you missed it. The Informed Medical Consumer Series starts next week. I think it's next week, yeah, after Memorial Day. And if you want to participate in that, if you're a member, you get that as part of your membership. If you're not, you can become a member and take it or just pay for the course. So highly recommend this. We're going to talk about questions to ask different providers, ranging from your regular medical family doctor to OB-GYNs and psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors and pediatricians, and how to read your blood test results and all that kind of stuff. And then summer semester starts at the Wellness Forum Institute very soon, and of course the Diet and Lifestyle course is offered every summer, and includes our celebrity lineup of teachers: Dr. McDougall, Dr. Barnard, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Ralph Moss, me, Janice Stanger. I mean, it is an amazing, amazing course that I know you will regret if you do not take it. So find out about how you can take part in that course. All right, so I have 2 topics, both related to nutrition, to talk about today. The 2015 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee recently submitted its report to the federal government, which will publish the guidelines later this year. In spite of retracting the recommendations regarding cholesterol, and I talked about that a 3 weeks ago, I'm definitely opposed to that. The guidelines are slightly less terrible. Notice I didn't say they were great. They're a little bit less terrible than they've historically been. The committee reported that diets lower in animal foods were healthier. That's a big step in the right direction, and had less environmental impact than the current standard American diet. Now, the meat industry disagrees, and when talking about this issue, they basically said that they can't argue that perhaps there's less environmental impact when you produce 10 pounds of plant food versus animal food, but that beef is superior in nutrition to plant foods, and so therefore it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. Well, not so, said many advocates of plant-based diets who encourage the government to stick with the guidelines as submitted. In fact, Michelle Simon, who's a public health attorney and represents a number of plant-based food manufacturing companies, says the guidelines didn't go far enough. She says that the message to eat less meat and processed meat should be replaced by a stronger message to limit very specific foods like steak, hamburgers, roast beef, and pork, and to avoid processed meats like ham, bacon, salami, and hot dogs. She's also critical, and I have been too, about picking out specific nutrients. She says consumers don't shop for saturated fat and cholesterol. They shop for meat, eggs, and dairy. And so I think that the guidelines often lack specificity, which the meat and egg and dairy producers like a lot, not so good for American health. She pointed out that the trend toward flexitarian diets, where meat eaters try various strategies to reduce their meat consumption, like meat-free Mondays and things like that, really are a sign that Americans need to be told how to eat less meat and how to eat more plant foods. Simon said that people who eat plant-based diets are consistently leaner and healthier than meat eaters with lower risks of disease. She also said that the majority of nutrients that are reported to be underconsumed by the average American are found in plant foods, not animal foods. She pointed out that milk products, and milk producers like to point this out all the time, contain calcium, but the plant foods like tofu, almonds, almond butter, broccoli, leafy green vegetables, dried figs, and beans contain calcium too. And so for the first time, I'm happy to see that these types of issues are being brought out, and actually people who advocate for plant-based diets are being part of the media buzz and discussion about the guidelines. Now, unfortunately, in the name of being fair and balanced, the meat industry has to be heard too. Rochelle Gilman, a registered dietitian who works for grocery store chain Hy-Vee, wrote that the dietary guidelines, quote, should help people eat lean meat more often instead of sending signals to reduce or eliminate all red meat. Well, of course, what people in our country need is advice on how to eat meat more often, because they certainly don't know how to do it. I mean, some of this stuff, you just can't make this up, right? Mary Kraft, president of the Colorado Livestock Association, said that none of the committee members are qualified to give recommendations on issues like sustainability. Well, I'll add to that. I don't think for the last 100 years the committee members, for the most part, have been qualified to give judgments or recommendations about sustainability or human health or anything else, which never bothered the livestock industry and the meat and dairy producers until the committee started talking about the fact that an animal foods diet is harmful to health. So they liked having nobody qualified when they were getting their way. Now they're quick to point out that the people don't have credentials. The North American Meat Institute weighed in, saying that the committee's recommendations, quote, reflect either an astonishing lack of awareness of the scientific evidence or a callous disregard of that evidence. And this might be the only time you ever hear me make a comment like this, but the committee may have gotten a few things right this time. And I think I'm gauging it by the fact that the meat industry is complaining the way that it is, that they're probably doing a pretty decent job. I like to hear the other side complaining. It means we might be upsetting them a little bit and getting closer to doing the right thing by people. All right, so here's why we have to get this right, why we have to keep talking about it. It's because diet matters, and plant food makes life better, improves the health status of people, and reduces their risk of disease, and in fact, will reduce your risk of colorectal cancer. So the American Cancer Society says that 132,700 Americans will be diagnosed with colon or rectal cancer this year. About 49,700 Americans are going to die from one or the other of those diseases. It's the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States when men and women are evaluated separately. The second leading cause of cancer death when we lump them together. Death rates from colon cancer have dropped a bit, and that is in part due to screening, which has some value. But it could drop even further if we pay more attention to diet. The relationship between plant-based diets and colorectal cancer is well established even before this study that I'm going to talk about in a second here. This particular study looked at varying dietary patterns for participants in the Adventist Health Study 2, which is a large prospective study of over 96,000 Adventist men and women. It included 7.3 years of follow-up, and the diets of participants were assessed at baseline and then categorized into 4 dietary patterns, all vegetarian, by the way. So one was vegan, another one was lacto-ovo-vegetarian, pesco-vegetarian, and semi-vegetarian, and then those were compared with a non-vegetarian diet pattern. So after the 7.3 years, the researchers determined that vegetarian diets are associated with a lower risk of colorectal cancers when compared with non-vegetarian diets. In terms of the different dietary patterns associated with vegetarian eating, pesco-vegetarian diet had the lowest risk, and the effect was similar in both men and women and Black and Caucasian patients. Now, as for the finding that the pesco-vegetarians had the lowest risk, there are a lot of possible explanations for this that may not lead you to believe that, or might not lead to the idea that eating fish is health promoting. For example, one of the shortcomings of studying people who eat vegan or vegetarian diets is it's possible to eat a vegetarian diet that might exclude red meat and chicken, for example, but include eggs and dairy. It's possible to eat a vegan diet where there's no animal food, but lots of oil and potato chips and junk foods and things of that nature. So I am looking forward to the day when health-promoting vegetarian or vegan diets are separated out from just vegetarian or vegan diets, because I think there's a lot of confusion about this. It's important to remember that fish is a risky food because of not only the fat content, which is sometimes higher than the fat in land animals, but the mercury contamination in fish. So we've never given fish special dispensation. Those of you who followed us for years know that our diet does allow for most people to eat up to 3 servings of organic animal food or wild fish a week. Fish is just part of the animal food, anything that has a face or a mother component, and you don't get to eat more of it because it's fish. So anyway, I'd trend more toward the dairy-free, very limited animal food, very low-fat diet as being the best way to reduce your risk of not only colorectal cancer, but of other forms of cancer and degenerative diseases too. All right, that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news.